Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, أحييكم بتحية الإسلام تحية مباركة من عند الله فالسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and a very good morning to everyone. On behalf of IAIS Malaysia, I would like to welcome all of you to our today's public lecture. We are indeed honored to have Professor Esposito with us today to share his insight on the topic of Islamophobia and the new policy of the US towards the Muslim world. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the continuous violence in the Middle East and other parts of the world has been attributed to extreme Muslim. Tragic attacks occurred in certain jurisdictions, particularly in the United States, such as September 11 and Orlando shooting, has portrayed Islam as radical religion that eventually led to Islamophobia. The wave of Islamophobia has become eminent in the United States recently with Trump's anti-Islamic pronouncement. The peak was his executive order banning people from 7 majority Muslim countries from entering the country. Such hatred campaigns against Islam indicates the cold foreign policy imposed by the US governments on Muslims generally. Hence, we are here today to listen and digest this issue that will be deliberated by our guest of honor, Professor Esposito. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed with the lecture, please join me to invite Professor Muhammad Hashim Kamali, the founding CEO of IAIS Malaysia, to deliver his introductory remark.
Gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, good morning. First, let me warmly welcome all of you, especially our guest of honor, the world-renowned professor and supporter of our institute, Professor John Esposito. We are indeed, it is a pleasure and privilege for us to have him here at IAIS Malaysia today, and even more so to say that this is not the first time he was here. He has been here with us before, and we have been in contact on occasions, virtually and otherwise. It's my great pleasure that I have the opportunity to sit with him again. I think the subject, Islamophobia, is the common perceptions he will be speaking about. But I may touch on 2 or 3 points. One is about terrorism. I think that since 9/11 and war on terror and so on, it's become very well known that Muslim thought leaders, religious and political leaders, they have resoundingly condemned acts of terror of Al-Qaeda. The Ulama Council of Indonesia, of Malaysian National Fatwa Council, and their equivalents in Egypt and Pakistan and elsewhere, they have all spoken and have some muftis of Saudi Arabia and others, they have stated very clearly that Islam has nothing to do with the kind of shameful activities that we hear renegade groups like IS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram. They give bad name to the vast majority of Muslims who are peace-loving and who do not sympathize nor approve of these acts of violence and terror. It is unfortunate that Islam, which is a religion of peace, mainstream Islam speaks of moderation, designates the Muslim community as ummatan wasatan, an ummah of the middle path. They stand for justice in truth in their capacity as witnesses. Mainstream Islam speaks of compassion, of justice, of ihsan, being good to others, of husn al-khuluq, pleasant manners. Even a pleasant word spoken to a fellow human being counts as an act of charity. And avoidance of harm to others is a principle of Islam. La darara wa la dirar fil Islam. Harm may not be committed, not tolerated. These are the values that Islam stands for. And terrorism and acts of violence, the way we hear, and Islamophobia has no foothold in mainstream Islam. And I think this has become very well known. And I stand and speak this before someone who has stood for the kind of teaching and conveying the understanding of Islam that I feel reassured. He is the voice of reason. He has stood for justice and he has stood for the truth. And I think that his services to Islam and scholarship are so well known that I don't need to really elaborate. Another word that I might touch upon is interfaith relations. Just last February, we celebrated the World Interfaith Harmony Week. This World Interfaith Harmony Week was designated by the United Nations in 2010 at the proposal of Jordan. But it was a culmination of a few other developments that also Jordan was a part of this common word initiative, a common word between us and you, a love of God and love of neighbor. This is something that is in common between Christianity and Islam. And it was very, very well received. It was very successful. Before that, at a time when Samuel Huntington's Clash of Civilization was taking traction, was at that time President Khatami of Iran. In 1997, in the United Nations General Assembly, there was talk of clash of civilization, but he introduced the idea of dialogue of civilizations. Then in 2004, that is after the 9/11 unfortunate events, the Turkish Prime Minister, now President Erdogan, together with his Spanish counterpart, they proposed the idea of alliance of civilizations. And this was approved by the United Nations, again a Muslim initiative. And then we had in 2010, all this time that the space is filled with Islamophobia and association of Islam with all kinds of things, Muslim leaders stand, again the Prime Minister of Malaysia, Prime Minister the current, in 2010 in the United Nations General Assembly, he spoke of wasatiyya, the Quranic principle of wasatiyya. And introduced the idea of the global movement of moderates. This is what is central to Islamic teachings, and he proposed it. Since then, this has become a program of his government, and several institutions have been established to work and promote what it means on the Quranic principle of wasatiyah. I wrote a book on this, The Middle Path of Moderation in Islam, the Quranic principle of wasatiyah. These are the values that we stand for. And I think that the Muslim responses have spoken from this middle ground, as we see. We have, this is something that is Quranic, it is germane to our civilization, to our values, because the Quran teaches us the idea of hell, that is dignified resistance to temptations, and not to be moved by provocations. I think that this is perhaps coming out in the responses that Muslim leaders have given. With the kind of voices that we have, especially from Professor John Esposito, there is hope that a better understanding, perhaps we may turn a page toward a better understanding. Islam has always had a conversation with other civilizations. This is also part of our mainstream understanding of Islam, where in the words of the Prophet, that wisdom is the last property of a believer. He is entitled to it wherever he finds it. He also speaks, "Utlubul ilma walau kana bisin." Go in search of knowledge, even if it be in China. In his time, China was not a place where you could find Islam, but it is the idea of openness to other influences. We have had this. We still have that with the Western countries, the United States. There are phases, but I do think we know. I have been in the United States, and I have spent time. When you sit with ordinary Americans, it's not like what you hear about their politics. And I think that will be our mainstay, our hope for a better future and better relations. I thank you for your attention. Assalamu alaikum.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and very good morning. First of all, we would like to thank our distinguished Professor Esposito for making this time to Malaysia materialize. And I would like to also thank Professor Hashim Kamali. Ladies and gentlemen, for your presence this morning. It is a very important series of lecture by Professor Esposito. As you all know that the first lecture begins today at IAIS and will be followed by other universities and places. So every day he has lectures until the date of his departure back to the States, what I can see from the itinerary. Here today, this morning, Professor Esposito will be sharing with us on the Islamophobia and the new policy of US towards the Muslim world. In the wake of President Donald Trump's controversial 2017 Muslim travel ban, many have become worried about the rise of institutionalized Islamophobia in the US. Proponents of the executive order were quick to disseminate the notion that Islam is more a political ideology than it is religious. This narrative has made Islam, in Huntingtonian style, the ideological enemy of the US, supplanting the communism in the Cold War era. Pondering to this Huntingtonian clash of civilization thesis, will not only prolong the misconstruction of Islam as a mere political ideology rather than a source of faith and spirituality like other Abrahamic religions, Judaism and Christianity, but due to its designation of Islam as civilizational other, will further alienate Muslims in the sphere of economy. Other widespread misconceptions include that Islam is inherently intolerant, anti-democracy, authoritarian, and has no shared values with the West. However, specialists and researchers in the field of political Islam have vigorously argued against these false perceptions. These misunderstandings are far from the truth and have long sown the hatred and negative stereotypes fueling Islamophobia and anti-Islam rhetoric. It is within this backdrop that we are honored to have our esteemed, distinguished speaker and world-renowned expert in Islam and politics, Professor Esposito, to share his view and updates on the matter of Islamophobia and how it has since affected the US policies and how it will determine its future trajectory. So with that, I would like to welcome Professor Esposito.